Listen, I'm not here to tell you that Wisconsin cheddar cheese makes you lose touch with all reality, but I am starting to wonder after what I've seen, read, and heard over the past couple of weeks out of Green Bay. I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. So, we all know what's going on. We're all following it. Aaron Rodgers wants to be a Jet. The Jets want Aaron Rodgers to be a Jet. The Green Bay Packers don't want Aaron Rodgers on their team anymore, but the Green Bay Packers know the Jets don't have a fallback option. So all the talk about who has leverage, everybody's got some leverage. Who's got more? Time will tell. But no matter who has more leverage, nobody has enough leverage to be making obscene demands along the lines of what we're seeing from not just Packers fans, but there are some guys on their beat. And listen, I'm not paying that much attention to these guys. Some of them might be bloggers. Some of them might be podcasters. Some of them might, listen, these are blue checks with tens of thousands of followers and these huge audiences or followings, and they're telling people that the Packers should be getting a 1 and then some 2 1s. We need a 1 in Garrett Wilson and Quinnen Williams, and let's talk about maybe Sauce Gardner. Are you kidding me? This is a 1-year rental. 1 year. That is how the Jets have to approach this. Aaron Rodgers told the world he was on the verge of retirement, 90% retired a month ago. The only reason he's coming back is because of the shoddy treatment he received from the Packers. Season ends, the Packers say, we love you, you're great, let us know what you want to do. Whenever you're ready, we'll support you. He goes down the rabbit hole for a couple days, he comes back up, and they're like, hey man, what are you still doing here? Haven't you made a decision yet? You're going to move on? We're ready for Jordan Love now. So, it got under Aaron Rodgers' skin. He said, you know what? I think I'm going to play for another year. Or I think I'm going to come back. And I want to play for the Jets. The Jets have to approach this as a 1-year rental. I mean, you talk about having a small window to win something. And by something, you're talking Super Bowl. We can talk about whether or not Aaron Rodgers makes the Jets a Super Bowl contender. But what's not up for debate is the Jets believe they will be one by getting him. Because you don't go all in with the money it's going to cost, with the with whether it's a 3 or a 4 or a conditional picks next year. Like the Jets are going all in if they go for Aaron Rodgers. Because if they do go for Aaron Rodgers, there's a very good chance they're looking for a quarterback again the same time next year. We can talk about whether or not Zach Wilson, blah, blah, blah. We're not talking about him today. We'll go over that Jet Nation Live, myself and Dylan Terman later in the week. But as of right now, the New York Jets are trying to get Aaron Rodgers, and they will have the smallest of windows. A season. 1 year. Might it go to 2? Possibly. But when the guy just told you he was 90% of the way to retirement, you treat it like 1. You've got 1 year, the Packers want picks, and the Jets don't have enough picks to just be giving them away willy-nilly. The Jets have holes, and they've got 6 draft choices. You're going to give the Packers a couple of picks. You're going to draft 4 guys this year? That's not going to work. And aside from the fact that it's just an absurd idea to give up the 13th overall pick for a 1-year rental, I think the Jets deal that pick. The Jets are probably looking at 13 and going, that's how we get from 6 picks to 8 or 9 picks. By dealing that one. That's our best chip. You deal that pick for Aaron Rodgers, you got 4 or 5 draft picks. And your most valuable one, the one that you can do the most with to add more picks, is gone. So, for a lot of reasons, it's not going to be a 1. It's just not. Just common sense, first of all. When was the last time you saw a team give up a first-round pick for a guy they knew they were only going to have for 1 year? It doesn't happen. We've seen this trade before. We saw the Packers and Jets. And look, I hate saying this stuff because every damn show, and it's been repeated a million times. But you had the Favre trade. It was a 3 and a conditional, and Favre was a guy who you thought had a few years left. Now you're getting a guy who's around the same age but was already on the verge of retirement, 90% according to himself, and you think that you're going to get 2 1s and Sauce Gardner? If it's anything more than a 3, if this ends up being a 2 or a 1 from the Jets to the Packers, I would have no doubt that Woody Johnson got involved again. I said when Derek Carr signed with the Saints that I believed that Woody Johnson probably stepped in, and then later on that day or the following day, whenever it was, a report came out from the Combine that one of the things being said there was that Woody Johnson was all in on Aaron Rodgers and wasn't going to sign off on a Derek Carr deal until they had a decision from Aaron Rodgers. Which, by the way, is the best leverage the Packers have right now. Is that they know Woody is the owner and Woody is the guy who put all the chips in the middle of the table on Aaron Rodgers. Passed on Derek Carr, who wanted to be a Jet, and now they're all in for 1 year of Aaron Rodgers. You're not giving up 2s and 1s and premium players for a 1-year rental unless your desperate owner gets involved. So that would be bad for 2 reasons with the Jets. One, it would be bad because you're giving up too much for a 1-year rental. And it would be bad because you're cutting Joe Douglas off the knees and kind of taking away his responsibilities with the biggest move that he's going to make as the Jets GM, or that he's not going to make. So I don't see it happening. The Jets need more picks, but how many picks do they need? And by that I mean, are there some guys the Jets have on the roster who people aren't talking about who could end up contributing, even starting on this team next year? Every now and then I like to say, I wish I was a fly on the wall at Florham Park so I could know what the Jets really think of, player X. And listen, I'm a fan. I want to know what they think of everybody. I want every internal scouting report. But I'm just talking about when there's a guy who maybe hasn't played as much as you would think, but you think the team really likes him, but you're not sure. You're like, are they holding him back, but they really like him? Or is it, well, he's not very good. He's just on the roster and he'll be gone next year. Tony Adams is the guy that comes to mind for me. He's two guys that come to mind that I would love to know. Would love to be a fly on the wall during their personnel meetings when the Jets talk about what they think about certain players, what their future role can be. The Jets need help at safety. LaMarcus Joyner's gone. Jordan Whitehead missed 17 tackles last year. And there's not a lot of depth. I know they just went and got Chuck Clark. We don't know what his role will be. He might start at safety, but he played so many spots for the Ravens. I could see Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich saying, this is a guy we're going to move all over the place, just like Baltimore did. He's going to play some linebacker. He's going to play some deep safety. He's going to play some slot. So he may not be a true safety. He might be more of a chess piece. That remains to be seen. But either way, the Jets need more safeties no matter what. So up to this point, we're kind of assuming, well, they're going to use one of their picks on a safety. Maybe Tony Adams makes that not the case. Tony Adams was a guy, when they picked him up as an undrafted free agent, I was talking draft with some of my, Jets fans, buddies, and other writers and other bloggers, and I kind of said, look, I don't know a ton about the guy, but when I was watching Illinois this year to watch Kirby Joseph, he did jump out at me. For his size, he was a much bigger hitter than I expected. So anytime you see that, you think this guy's got heart. This guy, if this guy's willing to go that hard against guys who outweigh him by 40, 50, 60 pounds, that's impressive. I didn't see a ton of his coverage skills, but I knew he was a converted corner. So I thought to myself, he's got to be able to cover at least as well as an average safety if you've converted him over from corner. Not a guarantee, but I liked his chances. And then he comes into camp with the Jets, gets rave reviews early. You watch the preseason, he looked solid. And then when he finally got on the field late in the year, unfortunately late in the year, not enough reps to truly make a judgment, he looked pretty good. He looked as good, again, I was hopeful, I was optimistic. I think this guy can probably cover a little bit. And he covered pretty well. Again, watching him in Illinois, I didn't watch a ton of his games. And he wasn't the guy I was focusing on. But from what I did see, there was some workable tools there. And we saw that translate in the pros. We saw him have a solid year last year. Again, UDFA, stuck all year, promoted to get some reps late in the season, and played all right for a guy, for his first NFL action. So is there that pressing need at safety that we believe there is? Well, listen, if Tony Adams can be that guy who's not afraid to come downhill and lay somebody out, but is also a guy who's capable of dropping back in coverage and sticking with his man, maybe that's not as pressing of a need. We as fans, and a lot of fans, not everybody follows all 53 guys. I'm sure there are a lot of Jets fans right now who couldn't tell you a whole lot about Tony Adams. But there are some of us who watched him in college, who watched him, went back and watched the All-22 when he played this year and came away impressed. So Tony Adams is the first guy that I would love to know what the Jets are saying internally, if they view him as a potential starter next year, or at least a significant contributor on defense. And the other one, again, same side of the ball, Jamien Sherwood. Last year, to me, I said this in preseason, He didn't play a whole lot during the year, didn't get many reps because Mosley stayed healthy. But I really thought from year 1 to year 2, the improvement at middle linebacker was very noticeable. I mean, even if you went with the most basic, fan observation, without getting into X's and O's, without getting into responsibilities, he was just always around the ball a lot more in year 2 than when he was in year 1, which tells you he's got a better idea what he's doing. He's getting a little bit more comfortable with the scheme. He's always around the ball. Versus the previous year, he saw some reps in preseason, but you didn't see him around the ball as much. So even from the most basic observation, is he starting to get it? And Jamien Sherwood was absolutely starting to get it last year. Again, Mosley stayed healthy, so he saw very few reps. But I would love to know internally, because we're all saying, linebacker, inside one of the Jets' biggest needs. You've got to draft one. Now listen, even if they love Sherwood, they probably still have to draft a linebacker, even having signed Quincy Williams. Mosley's long in the tooth. Williams is inconsistent. There are some really good linebackers in this class. Again, that's more that'll be covered on JetNation Live Thursday night at 6:30. But right now, those are the two guys that I look at and say, I could see them being a big part of this team's future, despite having not played much in the past. And I'd love to know, again, I'd love to be that fly on the wall and to know who are some guys on the current roster that not many people are discussing who can help out. Because these guys, just because we're not seeing them on Sundays, excuse me, just because we're not seeing them on Sundays doesn't mean that they can't contribute, in 2023 and beyond. And speaking of guys who can contribute, I wanted to go over a few free agents. I did a short article on JetNation.com yesterday. It's on the front page. You can look at it for a little more detail, but just a few names to throw out there because I see some people freaking out. Oh, we're missing out on free agents. Why isn't Joe Douglas signing everybody? Blah, 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 blah. Listen, I get that it's a little frustrating. It's a little bit boring. You'd like to see the team doing a little bit more right now, and they're not. But there's the Aaron Rodgers situation, and there's the fact that the Jets don't have a ton of cash, and with the signings they have made, they have come from out of nowhere. It's like you hear nothing, and then you hear signed. So it's not as if the Jets are like some teams where there's leaks and the Jets want there have been a couple of names that we've heard after they've signed. The Jets were in on this guy. The Jets were in on Fletcher Cox. The Jets were in on Orlando Brown. There was no word of this while it was happening. So the Jets, obviously Joe Douglas running a tight ship, not a lot of information getting out. But there are still some needs. As I said, you try to sign a tackle. Maybe you go after Cameron Fleming. He played last year in Denver under Nathaniel Hackett. Can play both sides, left tackle and right tackle. He's not a superstar player, but he's a solid, steady starter who's got versatility, and the Jets need that, right? He can basically become your George Fant, right? Because George Fant wasn't a bad player. Last year he struggled because of the injuries, but the previous year did a really nice job, and he proved he was a valuable player for this team with all the injuries they've had to tackle. We're all holding our breath and crossing our fingers and hoping like hell that Mekhi Becton, and can we give a little bit of love to Mekhi Becton? I mean, this guy, I think I said the other day, he's starting to look like a power forward. The amount of weight this guy's dropping, clearly putting in the work, takes him strain off that knee, get himself better conditioned. Maybe maybe he steps in this year and he plays 15, 16, 17 games. I know a lot of people have written him off. I'm not one of them. I did have some egg on my face this year because I fully supported him coming into the year, and in very short order, he was gone. Not bailing on the guy. I still think he can be a special Hall of Fame talent if he can stay on the field. The light has seemed to come on. He's dropped a ton of weight, so let's hope that he comes back and he's healthy. But even if he is, you've got Dwayne Brown, older guy, 40 years old, missed a chunk of time last year, played through an injury all year. So there are some guys, they don't have a lot of they don't have any tackle options who you can look at and say, we feel pretty comfortable that this guy's going to play at a high level and give us 13-plus games. They just don't have that. So maybe Cameron Fleming can be that guy. Yannick Ngakoue, very quietly, 19.5 sacks over the past couple years. He's a guy I know in years past, Jets fans have talked about maybe bringing him in. Obviously never panned out. A couple years ago, the Jets were supposedly interested in him, but it didn't work out. He's played for the Jaguars, played for the Colts, and like I said, 19.5 sacks the last 2 years, playing for the Raiders and Colts. So, as they say, you can never have enough edge rushers. Another guy, pardon me, another guy who I was a big fan of in college. He did drop off after his first couple years. John Johnson, safety out of Boston College, went to the Rams, drafted by the Rams. His first couple seasons, 22 passes defensed, 5 interceptions. Just looked like he was on his way to a great career. Then he got injured, missed some time, looked to was slow to recover, and then he moved on from the Rams to the Browns, where he played not nearly at the same level for a couple seasons. But the Browns are one of those teams, and let's face it, for time, you could make the same case for the Jets. Guys go to those teams and just don't perform as well as they had in the past. So given the holes they have at safety, even if they have high hopes for Tony Adams, this team would still do well by adding another safety. I think John Johnson is a guy to consider. Ben Jones is a name that's been floated. We heard it from Brian Costello of the New York Post. It makes sense. Any free agent center really makes sense at this point. The Jets don't have a legitimate starter. Maybe, and I've seen a million people say it, and I agree with every one of them. If you sign Ben Jones, you go out and you draft one. Is John Michael Schmitz going to be there in the second round for the Jets? I don't see that happening. But there are some other guys out there, whether they go a little bit later or the middle rounds. Juice Scruggs out of Penn State's a good option. You've got Whippler out of Ohio State, who apparently is a Jets fan. So there are some options there, but I think most folks, and of course Tippmann out of Wisconsin, who we've also talked about a couple times this year, a guy that I would consider. He'd probably be my number 2 guy behind John Michael Schmitz. And then Shelby Harris. The Jets need some help on the D-line, of course. Nathan Shepard left. Not the most heartbreaking move, but he is still a guy who ate up some reps. Nathan Shepard's gone. Solomon Thomas is back. And so maybe you go out and you sign Shelby Harris, who spent some time with the Jets years ago. I remember it was one of the seasons that I was out in Florham Park covering camp. I remember seeing him there, thinking he might be a pretty good player. Ended up not making the roster, but went on to have some very successful seasons with the Broncos. Was part of the Drew Lock trade that sent him from Denver, or the Russell Wilson trade. He went to Denver, or from Denver to Seattle, and then was let go. So Shelby Harris is out there, big-bodied interior guy. He gets to the quarterback a little bit, and he's solid all-around player, and something the Jets need right now. Because I mentioned Shepard, of course, and the Jets also lost Sheldon Rankins. So you lost a couple of bodies on the inside. You might want to replace those guys. And then Duron Harmon, the safety, spent a lot of time with the Patriots, but this is a guy who's had a lot of success. He's been in the league a long time, and if we're going to have a young safety, whether it's a draft pick or a Tony Adams, whoever it is, maybe bring in a guy like Harmon who can start some games and he can be a mentor to some of these younger guys. You need some depth there. I'm not suggesting they sign both Harmon and Johnson. One of the two would be fine. Sign one, draft one, go with Tony Adams, and, again, Chuck Clark, we'll see what the plan is for him. But those are just a few names I wanted to throw out there because, the Jets are going to make moves. The Jets have to make moves. There's talk of, I think it was Connor Hughes who said, yeah, there's going to be a lot more moves after this. They kind of don't have a choice. You've got so many holes and so little cap space. Someone's going to have to go. And that's another thing with the Sherwood thing. I mean, I'm not here to say that I think they're going to cut C.J. Mosley because I don't think they're going to cut C.J. Mosley. But he offers a huge cap relief, or he offers a ton of cap relief, as does Carl Lawson. Corey Davis saves you $10 million. Again, might be part of that Rodgers trade. But the Jets they've got to make a blockbuster move in a sense of whether it's releasing a big-name guy in order to add some guys. Because they still need help. They don't have a ton of cap space. And, the offseason free agency just got underway a week ago. I don't think people need to be losing their minds. I think you can always get quality players later in free agency. Quan Alexander is still out there. He's a guy the Jets got right before camp last year. I wouldn't be surprised if Quan was asking for whatever he was asking for, and the Jets said, look, man, go test the market. If you can do better than what we'll give you, good luck. Wouldn't be surprised if he's back. Not predicting he will be, but would not be the least bit surprised if a month or so from now, the Jets say to Quan Alexander, look, man, we're ready to bring you back, bring you in late, just like we did last year. And, we sometimes fans get too caught up in the first few days of free agency when all the big names are going off the board. It's like, oh, we're losing out on everybody. There are some really good players still out there to be had. And I think the Jets are going to continue doing what they're doing. They're going to be as quiet as can be while this is all happening. And then names are just going to, we're not going to hear that they're chasing somebody. We're just going to hear that they signed somebody. Now, who's going to be next? We'll have to wait and see. QB2 is a big thing. That'll warrant some more discussion, as I said, later in the week, Thursday night. But Zach Wilson at QB2, I think, would be, and I tweeted this last night, some people didn't like it. That's the way it goes. If you're going to go with Zach Wilson as your QB2, I'm confused as to why you're going out and getting Aaron Rodgers. And I say that because I'm a fan who lived through the Rick Mirer backing up Vinny Testaverde season. I mean, that was a team that plenty of people were picking to go to the Super Bowl. They were in the AFC Championship game the year before. They go into the season, and Rick Mirer is QB2. That season was over before the final whistle blew in week 1. Vinny Testaverde was out, and Rick Mirer was now your quarterback. And you thought, wow, Bill Parcells just came into a year with a guy who can't play quarterback as his number 2 quarterback behind an elderly, aging veteran. The Jets are now bringing in another elderly, aging veteran. God forbid they bring Aaron Rodgers in here and he gets injured in week 5 and we find out, even if it's a short-term thing, even if you say, oh, Aaron Rodgers is going to be out for 4 or 5 weeks. All right, well, if Zach Wilson, unless he has a miraculous, does a miraculous 180, if you're going to tell me he's starting for 4 or 5 weeks, I'm expecting 4 or 5 losses. So, some of the better guys are off the market now. The better options, the Gardner Minshews, Jacoby Brissett. Don't love either of those guys as a franchise starting quarterback. But as a backup to hold the fort for 4 or 5 weeks, absolutely. They're gone now. So who's out there? Teddy Bridgewater, probably the best of the bunch. Trevor Siemian's out there. Carson Wentz, don't get me started on Carson Wentz. That shouldn't even be a possibility. But again, when the alternative is Zach Wilson, and listen, Zach Wilson has a lot of fans, surprisingly. And as I've said before, I was one of them. And I still am. I still like Zach Wilson. I still want Zach Wilson to do well. I would love nothing more than for him. I said during the season, the first time I heard the notion of Aaron Rodgers being traded, it sounded preposterous. I thought that would never happen. But I also said, man, could there be a better guy to bring in? You bring in Zach Wilson's childhood hero to try to get his head on straight. You couldn't ask for a better scenario. And you couldn't. This is the best thing that could happen for Zach Wilson. That doesn't mean it's going to work. And you have to be prepared for it to not work. Because the last time we saw Zach Wilson, he was running from phantom pressure and bouncing passes several yards in front of his receivers, if not throwing them over their heads. We're talking screen passes, folks. We're not talking deep balls where he overshoots. We're talking receivers fully extended arms leaping and the football going over their heads onto the sidelines. So Zach Wilson, you can't just assume he's going to magically get better. So QB2 should have been a priority sooner. They should have been in on Gardner Minshew. They were not. So now, as I said, is it Teddy Bridgewater? Is it Trevor Siemian? Don't completely rule out Brett Rippon. Played last year for Hackett in Denver. He started against the Jets. Young guy, not a ton of reps, but listen, he knows the system. And as long as he can as long as he can complete the occasional pass, then he's probably a better option than Zach Wilson right now. And like I said, more on that later in the week. But that's going to do it for this week, folks. Just wanted to cover the Aaron Rodgers stuff. Wanted to talk about, these players on the roster who probably aren't getting enough credit. Tony Adams, Jamie Sherwood, or guys who might have a chance to really contribute for this team moving forward. And of course the Zach Wilson situation and a little bit of free agency. So that's it for this one. Check us out Thursday night, 6:30, JetNation Live. Myself and Dylan Terraman. The link will be shot out from either of our Twitter accounts, the JetNation account. If you're not following us on Twitter, get on there at JetNation. And we will catch you later in the week, folks. Have a good one.